They say a mother's love never dies, but sometimes it's that same love that ends up breaking her heart. The people you'd give your life for can become the very ones who take it apart piece by piece. And betrayal, it doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from your own blood. That night, I stopped being just a mother and became a woman who finally opened her eyes. My name is Sophia. I'm 64 years old, and I thought I'd seen every kind of pain life could give me. I lost my husband 11 years ago, survived loneliness, built a quiet life in a small house filled with memories. But nothing, not loss, not age, not time, could prepare me for the night I realized my only son was stealing from me. It was 3:17 in the morning when I woke up, not from a bad dream, not from thirst, but from a voice I'd known for 38 years, David's voice. It came softly through the thin wall that separated our rooms. At first, I thought he was talking to a friend, or maybe dealing with something urgent, but then I heard that tone, that quiet, secretive tone people use when they're doing something they don't want anyone else to hear. I stopped breathing, straining to listen. "Get everything, Lena," he whispered. "She's got more than 80,000 in her account. She's asleep." "We'll take it before morning," I froze. $80,000, my savings, my life's work. For a few seconds, I told myself maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe it was a joke, maybe it was someone else's name. But then I heard it clearly. The sound of numbers being said slowly, carefully, one after another. My card numbers. Each digit hit me like a hammer. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. My son, my own flesh and blood, was stealing from me. I could almost see Lena on the other end of the call, her greedy excitement barely contained. She'd always been charming on the surface. The perfect smile, the sweet voice, the polite hugs, but behind it all, I'd always sensed something cold, calculating. A mother knows, even when she stays silent. David kept talking, explaining how she should withdraw the money in small amounts to avoid suspicion, how he'd act normal so I wouldn't suspect a thing. His voice was steady, too steady. This wasn't their first time planning something like this. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, at that old water stain that had watched over me through countless sleepless nights. And I realized that stain had seen everything. It had watched me raise a son I thought would protect me, and now it was watching him destroy me. To them, I wasn't mom anymore. I wasn't the woman who worked 42 years at a garment factory, who saved every dime, who survived after losing her husband. To them, I was just a bank account with a name. But that night, something inside me changed. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't even move. Instead, I smiled, slowly, coldly. Because at 64, I had learned one thing about life. Age doesn't make you weak. It makes you patient. And patience gives you power. They thought they were clever. They thought I was old, naive, too kind to notice. But they were wrong. That night, as my son whispered the numbers of my bank card, I quietly made a promise to myself. I would let them play their little game. I would stay silent, and when the time came, they'd learn exactly who they were trying to steal from. By the time the first light of dawn touched my curtains, I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront them yet. People who betray you expect anger. They don't know what to do with silence. I got out of bed, made my coffee, and sat at the kitchen table pretending nothing had happened. Every sound in the house felt heavier. The creak of the floorboards, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant clink of David's bedroom door. When he finally came out, he looked surprised to find me awake. "Morning, Mom," he said, his voice casual, almost too calm. "Morning," I replied, sipping my coffee, watching him over the rim of my cup. He smiled, the same practiced smile I'd seen so many times, then walked out as if nothing had happened. but I saw it in his eyes. Guilt, hidden behind politeness. That afternoon, as I was folding laundry, I remembered something that had seemed innocent just days earlier. David had stopped by unexpectedly with a bag of pastries and my favorite coffee. He said he wanted to talk, that Lena missed me. I should have known then. Kindness that sudden always has strings attached. I could still hear his voice from that day. Mom, you should let us help you manage your money. You could invest it, maybe open a joint account, so if anything ever happens, it's easier for us to handle things. I had smiled politely, stirring my tea. Everything's already taken care of, David. I know what I'm doing. He'd clenched his jaw just for a second, then forced that same hollow smile. Sure, Mom. Just trying to help. Now I knew exactly what kind of help he meant. A couple of days after that, Lena had shown up alone. Her perfume arrived before she did. Sweet, strong, suffocating. Oh, Sophia, she said, stepping into my living room with that polished grin. I just had to see you. It's been forever. She sat down, crossing her legs elegantly, talking about how she worked with a credit union and knew safe ways to multiply my savings. Lies rolled off her tongue like honey. You've done such a wonderful job saving, she said, but with inflation, that money loses value sitting there. I could show you some great options, I had nodded, pretending to listen. That's kind of you, dear. But I prefer to keep things simple. Her smile tightened for a moment, just long enough for the mask to slip. Well, just think about it, she said, standing to leave. We only want what's best for you. When she left, she forgot her expensive box of cookies on the table. I didn't touch them. Somehow, they felt poisonous. That night, I lay awake replaying everything. Their timing, their words, their false concern. It was all part of one plan, and now, with what I'd overheard, I knew exactly how far they were willing to go. The next morning, I decided to play along. I smiled when they called, nodded when they visited, acted like nothing had changed. Because the best way to stop a thief is to let them believe you haven't noticed them stealing. I began moving things quietly. Documents, passwords, account details, preparing for the day they would try to strike. They thought they were clever, but they'd forgotten something. A woman who's spent her whole life surviving doesn't just give up when danger knocks. She plans. And that's exactly what I was doing. 2 days passed before David came again. I knew he would. When people like him sense that their plan is slipping away, they don't retreat. They push harder. It was late afternoon when I heard his car pull into the driveway. He didn't knock this time. He walked straight in, carrying grocery bags like he used to when he was younger. Back then, it was a sweet gesture. Now it felt rehearsed. Mom, he called cheerfully, I brought lunch. Thought I'd cook for you today. I turned from the sink, drying my hands on a towel. That's nice, David. You know you don't have to do that. He smiled and began unpacking the groceries on the counter. Chicken, rice, vegetables, everything he knew I liked. His movements were fast and deliberate, like a man on a mission. As the smell of food filled the air, he started talking about everything except what he came for. Old memories, Dad's fishing trips, his childhood room. He even laughed the same boyish laugh that used to melt me years ago. But now, every word sounded like a setup. After a few minutes, his tone shifted. Mom, can we talk about something? I nodded. Of course. He took a deep breath, as if preparing for a role. Lena and we've been struggling. Things haven't been easy. The house, the bills, we're drowning. We owe $30,000. I stayed quiet. He looked at me expectantly, then added softly, we were hoping you could help us out. Just a loan. You know we'd pay you back. I took my time answering, staring at the steam rising from the pot. David, I'm sorry you're struggling, I said gently, but I can't give you that kind of money. His eyes darkened instantly. Mom, please. You've got savings. I know you do. My heart clenched, but I kept my voice calm. I worked for that money my whole life. It's all I have. I can't risk losing it. The mask started to slip. His voice grew sharper. You're being selfish. You'd rather let your own son lose everything? I turned to face him. You lost everything the moment you tried to take what isn't yours. He froze for a second, caught off guard by the firmness in my tone. Then he laughed bitterly. You've always been like this. Controlling. You never trusted me. I trusted you, I said quietly. I just never imagined I'd have to protect myself from you. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, without another word, he shoved his hands in his pockets and stormed toward the door. The slam echoed through the whole house, rattling the dishes on the shelves. When he was gone, I stood there for a long time, surrounded by the smell of burnt rice and silence. The son I once rocked to sleep had just looked at me like I was his enemy. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't even think straight. Every sound in the house, a creak, a gust of wind, a floorboard shifting, made me jump. I knew that confrontation wasn't the end of it. It was only the beginning. People like David and Lena don't stop when you say no. They stop only when they have nothing left to take. And I wasn't going to wait for them to destroy me. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. But it would be on my terms. The next morning, before the sun came up, I made my first move. I didn't know exactly how it would end. But I knew one thing. When it did, they'd never look at me the same way again. The morning after David's outburst, I woke up before dawn. Sleep had become a stranger to me. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the fog outside. The world looked peaceful. Soft light, quiet streets. But inside my chest, a storm was building. I knew that confrontation wouldn't stop him. If anything, it would make him more desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. By the time the clock struck 7, I was already dressed and ready to leave. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, grabbed my purse, and locked the door behind me. My first stop was the bank. I'd been a loyal customer there for over 20 years, but that day I wasn't visiting as a client. I was there as a woman preparing for war. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, greeted me. Good morning, Mrs. Sophia. How can I help you today? I leaned closer, my voice steady but low. I'd like to make some changes to my account. Within an hour, I'd done 3 important things. First, I transferred nearly all my savings, over $80,000, into a new account under a different name I had opened quietly months ago, back when I first began to doubt Lena's intentions. Second, I froze all online access to my old account. And third, I asked the bank to issue me a new card, one I could keep safe, one they'd never find. When I left the bank, the morning air felt different, lighter. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control again, but I wasn't done. On my way home, I stopped by a small electronics shop and bought a security camera. One small enough to hide behind a vase in the living room. If David and Lena decided to cross the line, I wanted proof. Not just to protect my money, but to make them face what they'd become. By evening, everything was in place. The new card was hidden in a place no one would think to look, inside the hollow base of an old lamp in my bedroom. The documents were tucked into the lining of my coat. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the empty driveway. The wind carried faint sounds, a car door shutting, footsteps somewhere in the dark. I didn't move. A few minutes later, I heard it. The slow turn of the front doorknob. My heart thudded once, then fell silent. I had locked it. I was sure I had. The door creaked open. And then, his voice. Mom? David. He stepped inside, pretending to sound casual. You left your porch light on. Just came to check if you were okay. I stayed still, sitting in my chair by the window. "It's fine," I said. "You can go." He hesitated, looking around. His eyes lingered on the table, the counter, the purse beside me. Searching. "All right," he muttered finally and left. I didn't move until I heard the car pull away. Then I checked my purse. The zipper was slightly open. Nothing was missing this time, but it wasn't about stealing anymore. It was about testing me. I turned toward the small hidden camera's blinking light. It had captured everything, every glance, every step. And as I sat there in the dim light, one truth settled deep inside me. David wasn't my son anymore. He was a stranger wearing my child's face, and strangers don't get second chances. The next 2 days passed in heavy silence. David didn't call, Lena didn't visit, but that didn't comfort me. It only made me more certain they were planning something. When people like them go quiet, it's not because they've given up. It's because they're getting ready to strike harder. I kept my phone beside me everywhere I went. The security camera I'd installed had an app that notified me when it detected motion. Every ping made my heart jump. Most of the time, it was nothing. A shadow, a passing car's headlights, a gust of wind brushing against the curtains. Until one afternoon, it wasn't. It was a Wednesday. I had gone out to the market for groceries, staying longer than usual on purpose. I wanted to test a theory. What would happen when they knew I wasn't home? At 3:42 p.m., my phone vibrated. Motion detected. Living room. My chest tightened. I stopped right there in the middle of the street and opened the camera feed. There he was, David. He had a key. I watched him walk in, looking around cautiously before locking the door behind him. His movements were tense, hurried. The behavior of someone who knows he's doing something wrong. He went straight to the kitchen drawers, then to the cabinet near the window, the one where I used to keep my documents. He rifled through everything, muttering under his breath. Then I saw her, Lena. She entered quietly a minute later, wearing gloves and carrying a small purse. I could barely breathe as I watched them. "Check her bag," Lena whispered. "She always keeps her card close." David opened my purse on the table, digging through every pocket. When he found nothing, his face twisted in frustration. "She moved it," he hissed. "Then keep looking," Lena snapped, her voice low but sharp. They turned the house upside down. Drawers, closets, even my sewing box. When David reached for my bedroom door, I gripped my phone tighter. Inside that room, hidden inside an old lamp, was my new card, the one that held all my money. He stepped in, scanning the room slowly. My heart raced so hard it hurt. Lena's voice came from behind the camera. "Hurry up, someone might see us." After a few tense seconds, he gave up. "It's not here," he muttered. "We'll come back tonight." She has to sleep sometime, and just like that, they left, as quietly as they came. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, phone in hand, staring at the footage playing over and over. The pain wasn't just that they tried to steal from me. It was the ease with which they did it. No guilt, no hesitation. Just two people I once called family, treating my home like a bank vault. When I finally got back home, I didn't cry. I didn't even shout. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the lamp that had protected me. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I replayed the video again and again, memorizing every detail, every cruel word, every careless glance, and somewhere between anger and heartbreak, a plan began to form in my mind. If they were coming back that night, I would be waiting, but not as their helpless mother, not as the woman they thought they could deceive. I would be waiting as someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The next few hours would decide everything, and by morning they'd finally learn what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, my heart had settled into a steady rhythm. not from calm, but from control. Fear had burned itself out, leaving behind something sharper: determination. I spent the early evening moving quietly around the house, every motion deliberate. I double-checked the hidden camera, angled it slightly toward the hallway, and placed a second one, a cheap backup I'd bought that morning, near the front door. Then I did something I never imagined I'd do. I left the door unlocked. It was a dangerous move, but I wanted them to believe the opportunity was perfect. Thieves are brave only when they think they're safe. At 9, I turned off the lights, leaving only the small lamp glowing faintly in my bedroom. I climbed into bed, fully dressed, and waited. The silence stretched so long it felt like a living thing. Every tick of the clock echoed in my chest. Then, at 12:23 a.m., I heard it. The slow, careful turn of the front doorknob. I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed, pretending to sleep. Soft footsteps crept across the floorboards. Then another pair followed, David and Lena. I could recognize the sound of my son's footsteps anywhere. Even after everything, my heart still reacted. For a split second, I wanted to believe he'd changed his mind, that he was here to apologize. But I knew better. Through the crack in my eyelids, I saw the faint glow of their flashlights sweeping across the walls. "She's asleep," David whispered. "Are you sure?" Lena asked. He leaned closer to my doorway. "Positive. Let's just get it done." They moved quickly. Lena went straight to the cabinet again while David checked the drawers, the shelves, the small safe near my closet. I had emptied it earlier, leaving only old papers inside. Minutes passed. Their movements grew faster, more frantic. "She must have hidden it somewhere new," Lena hissed. David's voice trembled. "She's not stupid, Lena." "We have to find it tonight." I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Every instinct screamed to get up, to stop them, but I stayed still. This wasn't the time for anger. It was the time for evidence. They had no idea both cameras were recording every word, every move, every theft. Then suddenly, Lena's voice rose. "Wait, check the lamp." My blood ran cold. David reached for it, the very lamp that held my new card inside its base. He lifted it, shaking it slightly. The hollow thud gave it away. "It's in here," he whispered triumphantly. Before he could pry it open, I sat up slowly in bed. "Put that down." The words came out steady, low, almost too calm. They both froze. The flashlight beam hit my face, blinding for a second. "Mom," David stammered, stepping back. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't you dare call me that right now." Lena lowered the lamp, her hands shaking. We were just what?" I cut her off. "Breaking into my home? Searching for my money? Lying to my face?" David's voice broke. "Mom, we just needed help." "Help?" I repeated bitterly. "You call this help?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Lena looked toward the door. "Let's go," she whispered. But before they could move, I pointed to the small camera light blinking faintly from the shelf. "It's all recorded," I said quietly. "Every second of it." David's face went pale. "You recorded us?" "No," I said, my voice flat. "You recorded yourselves." They stood frozen like children caught in a lie too big to fix. And for the first time in months, I felt no fear, only peace, because I finally had what I needed. When they left that night, running instead of walking, I knew the story wasn't over. But for the first time, the power was no longer in their hands. It was in mine. The house was silent after they left, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm, heavy, broken, full of debris you can't see but can feel everywhere. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the lamp that had just saved my life's work, the lamp that now held the last thread of my relationship with my son. The camera's tiny light blinked steadily in the corner, as if reminding me that the truth was no longer just mine. It was recorded, undeniable, permanent. When morning came, I brewed coffee, though I didn't drink it. My hands were too unsteady. The world outside looked the same, but nothing inside me was. David hadn't called. Neither had Lena. Part of me hoped they'd come to their senses and show up at my door to apologize. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. People who cross a line that big rarely turn back. I replayed the footage again, this time on my laptop. Every sound, every whisper hit harder than before. The moment David found the lamp, the way his face lit up with greed, it shattered something inside me that would never mend again. I had proof, enough to go to the police, enough to make them face what they had done. But as I sat there, with my finger hovering over the phone, I froze. How do you call the police on your own child? He was the boy I'd raised alone after his father died. The boy I'd walked to school in the rain, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose first heartbreak I'd comforted. And now, that same boy had become a man who would rob me without hesitation. Tears burned my eyes, but I forced them back. Love and justice don't live in the same room. I realize that now. Sometimes you have to choose one to protect the other. By noon, I knew what I had to do. I printed a copy of the footage, placed it inside an envelope, and wrote a short note. For your records. In case something happens to me. Then I got dressed, grabbed my purse, and walked out the door. My steps were slow, but they didn't falter. At the police station, the officer at the counter looked up. "Ma'am, how can we help you?" I took a deep breath. "I need to report an attempted theft," I said. He nodded and took out a form. "Do you know the suspect?" My throat tightened. "Yes," I whispered. "He's my son." The words tasted like ashes. The officer's expression softened. "We'll handle it carefully, ma'am." "Do you have evidence?" I handed him the USB drive. "Everything's on there." For a long moment, he didn't say anything, just looked at me with quiet respect, as if he knew how heavy that decision must have been. "I'll file it," he said gently. "You did the right thing." Did I? I wasn't sure anymore. When I walked back home, the street felt longer than it had ever been. The house stood still and lonely under the afternoon sun. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Clean, quiet, but hollow. I sat on the couch, staring at the front door. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to hear my son's footsteps. I knew the police would contact them soon, and when they did, whatever remained of our bond would shatter completely. But this wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about protection, about finally choosing myself, even if it meant losing him. That night, I looked out the window and whispered softly, "I hope one day you understand why I did this, David. Because no matter how much he'd hurt me, he was still my son. And even when a mother stops forgiving, she never stops loving." 3 days passed after I handed the footage to the police. 3 long, hollow days where every sound made my heart skip. Every knock, every car door outside, every ringing phone. Part of me wanted to take it all back, to pretend it hadn't happened. But another part, the stronger part, kept whispering, "You did what you had to do." On the morning of the 4th day, I got the call. "Mrs. Sophia," the officer's calm voice said, "we've reviewed your evidence. We'll be sending a unit to visit your son today. We'll keep you updated for a few seconds." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, though he couldn't see me. When I hung up, my hands were trembling again. Not from fear this time, but from heartbreak. I knew the moment was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. That afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the floor, I found myself standing by the window staring down the empty street, and then I saw it. A patrol car slowing near the corner of David's house, 2 blocks away. It stopped, 2 officers got out. I couldn't hear what they said, but I could imagine it. David opening the door, confusion flickering across his face. Lena standing behind him, trying to read their badges. Then the shift. Realization dawning, panic spreading. I couldn't watch anymore. I closed the curtain, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. My heart was breaking all over again. It wasn't anger I felt, it was grief. Grief for the boy who used to hug me after nightmares, for the man he could have been, for the family we used to be. But grief doesn't erase truth. The next morning, the officer called again. "Your son and his wife admitted to entering your home without permission," he said gently. "Given the evidence, they'll face charges. We'll make sure you're protected." I thanked him, but my voice was barely a whisper. After the call, I sat in my kitchen staring at the same spot where David had once stood cooking for me, pretending to care. Now, that space felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories. People think justice brings peace, but it doesn't. It brings closure, yes, but peace? That's something you have to build yourself afterward, brick by brick, through forgiveness and time. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a knock came at my door. For a moment, I froze, afraid it might be him. But when I opened it, it was a familiar face. Officer Reed, the one who'd handled my case. He handed me a small envelope. "We recovered this from your son's car," he said. "We thought you might want to see it." Inside was a folded piece of paper, David's handwriting. It wasn't long, just a few lines. "Mom, I don't know how to ask for forgiveness. I don't even know who I've become. You were right. I lost more than money. I lost you. I'm sorry." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not from anger or fear, but from the unbearable mix of love and loss only a mother can feel. I sat there long after the officer left, holding that note. It didn't fix what he'd done. It didn't erase the betrayal. But it was a start. A small piece of humanity left inside the ruins. As I placed the letter inside my old photo album, beside his childhood pictures, I whispered to the empty room, "That's all I ever wanted, David. The truth." And for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel cold. It still hurt, but it was finally quiet in a way that didn't scare me. Weeks passed. The days stretched softly, one into another, as if time itself was trying to heal what it had broken. The police calls stopped. The reporters who had lingered around the neighborhood moved on. The whispers faded. The air grew lighter. But inside me, the echo of that night still lived. Not sharp anymore, but faint, like the sound of a door closing far away. David and Lena were out on bail, waiting for their hearing. The officer said the evidence was strong. The sentence would likely include probation and community service, maybe restitution. That didn't matter to me anymore. Justice had already done what it needed to do. What mattered now was rebuilding what was left of me. Every morning I tried to return to normal. Watering the plants, reading by the window, knitting for no reason at all. It was strange how silence felt different now. It wasn't the heavy silence of fear or waiting. It was the stillness that follows survival. One afternoon, I walked into David's old room for the first time since everything happened. The air smelled faintly of dust and the past. His childhood trophies still lined the shelf. Soccer medals, a faded photo of him holding a kite, a letter he wrote to me when he was 10. "Mom, you're the best in the world. I'll take care of you when I'm big." I sank onto his bed, holding that letter in trembling hands. Life has a cruel way of turning promises into lessons. As the sun warmed the curtains, I thought about forgiveness, not as a gift to him, but as something I needed for myself. Carrying anger felt like carrying fire in my chest. It burned only me. So I whispered into the empty room, "I forgive you, David. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." That night, I wrote a letter of my own. Not to send, just to say what needed saying. David, when you were little, you used to ask if I'd still love you if you did something bad. I always said yes. That hasn't changed. You broke my trust, but you're still my son. I hope one day you understand what love truly means. Not taking, not demanding, but protecting. I hope the man you become learns to live with kindness again. Mom. I folded the letter and placed it in the same box where I kept his apology note. I didn't cry this time. Some tears belonged to the past. The next morning, I went outside, sat on the porch, and watched the world wake up. The birds returned to the old oak tree. A neighbor waved from across the street. Life, stubborn, beautiful life, kept moving. I thought about all the years I'd spent saving money, guarding it like a shield. In the end, that money had brought me nothing but heartache. So I made a decision. A week later, I visited the local women's shelter. They were struggling to keep their doors open. I donated half of what I had left. The director cried when she thanked me. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. Because generosity, I realized, is something thieves can never steal. When I came home that evening, I stood at the window where it had all begun. The night I heard my son's voice plodding in the dark. Now the same house felt different. It wasn't a place of betrayal anymore. It was a place of strength, the kind of strength that comes only after losing everything and still choosing to love anyway. As the sun set, I whispered one last time, "Good night, my boy. Be better than what you were." And for the first time in months, I turned off the light, lay down, and truly slept, because the storm had finally passed. You like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect,